Unity Group approach is one of impartial due diligence, expected by investors seeking in-depth assessment prior to making substantial investments. We applied this technique to the entire planet by thinking of it as Earth Inc., looking at critical data impacting forward investment, and then connected the dots across a wide range of interrelated consequences. What follows is one example of our work. As the world's official bodies continue to wrangle over what needs to be done to address the ever-mounting evidence of climate change and who needs to do what, we appear to be passing through a totally unacknowledged and very serious tipping point. The evidence of this is profound. This is Al Gore at Davos in 2015, presenting graphics derived from a scientific paper by Jim Hansen et al. A paper not based on computer models, nor based on scientific hypothesis, but based on actual recorded measurements of land-based Northern Hemisphere summertime temperatures. The data was compiled by the Goddard Institute for Space Studies, from inputs spaced at 250-kilometer intervals between reporting stations. The Hansen graphic we're looking at shows the baseline selected, 1951 to 1980. The blue areas show days that are cooler than average, the white area average, and the red area warmer than average. The height is a function of the frequency of these events. On the left, we see a classic normal distribution, a tool that is used extensively for analysis throughout the length and breadth of modern societies. The key issue is that 3 standard deviations, or 3 sigma, either side of the mean, contain 99.7% of all the data applicable to the population, or the subject matter being examined. Anything beyond 3 sigma is considered extreme, as only 0.15% remain on either side of these observations. The next slide shows what happened over the next 3 decades. The top left is Hansen's baseline. Next, we see what happened when the temperatures were compared with the baseline over the following 3 decades. Notice that the entire distribution starts and then continues to move to the right. The white areas, which show the average days with which we are all familiar, are declining in frequency and being left progressively behind. By decade 2, warming events were occurring at 4 and 5 sigma. But also notice that on the cool side, events were also occurring at a 4th standard deviation as the overall weather became more extreme. When you look at this, remember that anything beyond 3 sigma either side of the mean is an extreme event. The red area expands with each successive decade as the blue and white areas decline. But the most disturbing feature of all is the dark crimson area that progressively develops on the right beyond 3 sigma and extends all the way to the very extreme 5 sigma observations. Notice too that with each successive decade, the frequency of extreme events is increasing, indicated by the growth in height. By the 3rd decade, this area of the distribution has become highly significant, and as the insert graphic shows, 10% of the Earth was experiencing these extreme events. Look back to the baseline period, 1951 to 1980. These events occurred at just 0.1%. That's a 100-fold increase in just 3 decades. So what characterizes such extreme heat events? In 2003, a persistent heat wave across 12 European countries caused 80,000 related deaths. In 2010 through to 2011, extreme weather events in Russia caused the loss of 40% of the wheat harvest. That in turn triggered international unrest, including the Arab Spring, as Putin placed a moratorium on wheat exports, and the price of wheat worldwide skyrocketed. In 2012, an extensive drought commenced throughout the major agricultural areas of the US, which resulted in cattle herds being culled back to 1956 levels and ongoing major crop shortfalls. This year, drought is reaching critical levels in California, which is by far the largest agricultural production state in the US, and now facing major water shortages. The full list is too extensive to cover here, as every continent has been affected, and around the world, the traditional seasonal cycles become more and more disrupted. But we trust the point has been made. Extreme weather events are increasing rapidly, and the interrelated consequences are going to be considerable. The key question is, how rapid is that increase? We have dug deeper into Hanson's paper and analysed the trend that has occurred. It results in an expanded and profound interpretation. Here are the original Hanson graphics. Plate 1 is the baseline. Notice the baseline distribution is limited to 3 sigma either side of the mean. A 3 sigma event has a probability or odds of occurring 1 in 370 times. For instance, TV meteorologists and reporters often talk of 100-year floods, storms, or heat waves. These occur at 2.58 sigma in the corresponding distribution. Plate 2 shows what happened in the decade 1981 to 1991. The nature of the events caused the standard deviations to be increased from 3 to 5 on the right side. We were unsure of the detail between 4 and 5 sigma, so we cropped a section of the plate and enlarged it. The most extreme event shown is around 4.89 sigma. That would be a probability of 1 in 1 million. But to be on the conservative side, we've selected 1 in 750,000. The clear implication, as Hanson implies in the paper, is that this is evidence of us starting to leave behind the weather patterns of the Holocene and literally start hurtling into the unknown. Plate 3 shows what happened in the decade 1991 to 2001. Extreme events have definitely reached 5 sigma. The probability of a 5 sigma event is slightly under 1 in 1 3/4 million. Plate 4 shows what happened in the final decade, the paper analysed, 2001 to 2011. Once again, we cropped and enlarged. It is clear that the analysis was limited to 5 sigma events, but one can see a vertical build at that boundary. So we've extended the baseline and projected a curve to estimate what had occurred beyond 5 sigma. 5.327 sigma has a probability of 1 in 10 million. So now we have a series of numbers from the Hanson graphics to plot, and we can review what a graph will reveal. What we see is an exponential curve indicating that we are in the process of spiraling out of control. From the analysis of Hanson's graphics, we know we are already beyond 5 sigma and headed for 6. The alarming fact is that we don't actually know what is happening and where we are. A major mistake. But it is in line with the cavalier approach that some are enforcing. The probability of events at 6 sigma is just under 1 in 507 million, a colossal number by any standards. And in order to continue to plot the curve, the vertical axis would need to be over 6 meters or 20 feet high. The implication is that we're going to experience events totally outside of human experience and utterly unsuited to our civilization, with its need to feed a growing population of over 7.2 billion people. So if you had a suspicion that the weather has fundamentally changed, then you are absolutely right. One rational conclusion we can make from the curve on the graph is that we passed through a tipping point, and an extremely serious one, at some point between 2001 and 2011, and that the climate has now entered a highly dangerous non-linear mode. On a risk assessment basis, we have to consider that this trend may now be unstoppable. These are some of the consequences of an increase in temperature of just 0.5 degree centigrade over the last 3 decades. The frequency and intensity of these events are related to the increase in the overall temperature of the planet, and let me repeat, this is just the result of a mere 0.5 degree centigrade increase over the 30 years between 1981 and 2011. Clearly, we have moved way outside the natural variability of that baseline, and even further from the variability of the last 150 years where we prospered. And let us bear in mind that the overall temperature increase above the pre-industrial benchmark is currently only 0.86 of a degree centigrade. So we invite you to draw your own conclusions from the exponential curve on the graph and consider what the pot will look like for plate 5 in the years 2011 to 2021. And now consider that the powers that be are trying to tell us that really dangerous climate change will not occur until we reach more than 2 degrees centigrade of warming. Let us be very clear about this state of affairs. The delegates in Paris will not be assessing the latest data on the situation due to built-in procedures and protocols. As the climate continues to spiral out of control in a non-linear manner, the majority of them will be fixated on a shallow linear mode and will be clinging to the idea that there are many decades left in which to act, and therefore considering how best to perpetuate the fossil fuel-based economy. As things stand, the only likely change in the 2 degrees C upper limit will be a push by some to exceed it, irrespective of the factual evidence of what has already transpired at 0.86 degrees centigrade of warming. Sadly, the truth is that some people are not prepared to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions and long-held beliefs to be destroyed. So as far as investing in Earth Inc. is concerned, our recommendation is that unless the current management recognize the magnitude of the rapidly developing crisis and immediately institute radical changes in policy, Earth Inc. as an entity may very soon progressively devolve into chaos and cease to be viable for investment.